Some tanks became legends, others became disasters. Machines so badly designed that their own crews feared them more than the enemy. Some were built in panic, others were built for propaganda, and a few were simply too ambitious for their time. These are the tanks that looked powerful on paper, but failed in the real world. Bob Semple Tank. In 1940, New Zealand faced a serious problem. Britain had lost huge amounts of equipment at Dunkirk, Japan was expanding across Asia, and New Zealand had almost no armored vehicles, so the government improvised. Public Works Minister Bob Semple looked at the only heavy machines available, tractors. Using Caterpillar bulldozers and little more than an American postcard for inspiration, engineers attempted to build a tank from scratch. No proper blueprints, no tank building experience, and almost no time. The result looked absurd. Corrugated metal plates covered the vehicle like a moving shed. Machine guns pointed out from every direction. One crew member had the worst position of all. He lay on a mattress directly above the engine, firing through a small hole in the armor. The vehicle was painfully slow. Every gear change required the entire tank to stop completely. Inside, conditions were miserable: heat, noise, smoke. But New Zealand was desperate. In the end, the Army decided not to continue the project. Japan never invaded, and the strange improvised tank quietly disappeared into history. Saint-Chamond, France faced a different problem during the First World War. The Army needed tanks capable of crossing trenches and breaking enemy defenses. Instead, politics got involved. A company secured a massive contract despite military objections. The result became the Saint-Chamond. At first glance, it looked impressive. Large gun, heavy armor, massive size. But the design contained one fatal flaw. The front of the tank extended far beyond its tracks. Whenever it tried to cross a trench, the nose slammed directly into the ground. The track spun helplessly in the mud. The tank designed to cross trenches could barely cross trenches. Its first combat experience was disastrous. Many vehicles became stuck almost immediately. Engineers tried fixing the problem again and again. Nothing worked. The tank was simply too long for its own tracks. Neubaufahrzeug. Before the Second World War, Germany wanted the world to believe it possessed terrifying heavy tanks. In reality, it mostly had prototypes. The Neubaufahrzeug looked intimidating. Multiple turrets, large silhouette, heavy appearance. Foreign intelligence agencies became so confused by photographs of the vehicle that some believed Germany had developed entirely new classes of tanks, but only a handful were ever built. When Germany invaded Norway in 1940, several Neubaufahrzeug tanks were sent north, mainly for propaganda purposes. The problems began almost immediately. One broke down before reaching the battlefield. Another failed shortly afterward. Only one actually reached combat, and once it did, British anti-tank rifles pierced its armor surprisingly easily. The illusion disappeared very quickly. By the end of the war, the surviving prototypes were reportedly used as target practice. None survive today. T-35. The Soviet T-35 was never really designed for practical warfare. It was designed to impress people. 5 turrets, 10 crew members, almost 60 tons of steel. During military parades in Moscow, it looked unstoppable, exactly what Soviet propaganda wanted. But real combat exposed a different reality. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, T-35 tanks began moving toward the front. Many never arrived, not because of enemy fire, because the tanks kept breaking down, gearboxes failed, transmissions collapsed, mechanical systems overheated during long marches. Some crews destroyed their own tanks before abandoning them. One driver later admitted he feared the transmission more than the enemy. The giant parade machine was simply too complicated and unreliable for modern war. M13/40. Italy entered the war in North Africa with hundreds of M13 tanks. On paper, the design looked acceptable. In reality, it had serious problems. Most crews received very little training before deployment. Many tanks lacked radios entirely. Units often communicated using signal flags during combat. The armor created another deadly issue. It was held together with rivets. When enemy shells struck the vehicle, the rivets could snap loose and fly around the interior like bullets. Even without penetrating the armor, the impact could still kill the crew. British forces eventually captured so many M13 tanks, they started using them against the Italians themselves. That alone revealed how badly the campaign was going. Type 89. Japan's Type 89 tank worked reasonably well during operations in China. Against lightly armed opponents, it was effective. Its armor resisted rifle fire. Its gun worked well against defensive positions. Then it encountered Soviet armor. At battles like Khalkhin Gol, Soviet anti-tank guns tore through the tank with ease. Japanese commanders immediately understood the problem. The design was obsolete, but replacing it would take time. So the old tank stayed in service, even during the Second World War. By the time American forces encountered surviving Type 89 tanks in the Philippines, the design already belonged to another era. Turan, Hungary desperately needed a modern tank during the Second World War. The solution became the Turan. Based on a Czech prototype, the tank underwent multiple modifications before entering production, and every delay made the situation worse. While engineers worked on the vehicle, the Soviet T-34 continued improving. By the time the Turan finally entered combat, it was already outdated. Its gun struggled badly against Soviet armor. Hungarian crews often needed dangerously close shots to damage enemy tanks. Losses mounted quickly. Germany eventually supplied Hungary with better armored vehicles because the Turan simply could not compete anymore. Stridsvagn M/42. Sweden wanted a modern medium tank as quickly as possible. The result became the Stridsvagn M/42. Its greatest weakness was hidden inside the transmission. Sweden purchased a complex gearbox from Germany. The manufacturer promised the system would last forever. It did not. The transmission overheated constantly. Parts failed after short distances. Mechanical breakdowns became common. Engineers later discovered serious quality problems in the steel itself. At the same time, the tank's gun was already struggling against newer foreign armor. The vehicle entered service modern and began aging almost immediately. M60A2 Starship. The M60A2 looked like something from the future. Its crew gave it a nickname, Starship. Inside the turret sat a maze of electronics, sensors, switches, and experimental systems. The concept sounded revolutionary. Instead of relying mainly on conventional shells, the tank could launch guided missiles capable of destroying enemy armor at long range, at least in theory. In reality, the system became a nightmare. The gunner had to keep the target perfectly aligned during the missile's entire flight. If the target disappeared behind terrain for even a moment, guidance failed. Normal cannon fire sometimes disrupted the electronics, and complicated systems malfunctioned constantly. The futuristic tank quickly became a maintenance disaster. TR-85. After the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968, Romania wanted a tank it could build independently. The result became the TR-85. Engineers based the vehicle on Soviet designs but heavily modified the platform. On paper, everything looked promising. Reality was different. Engines leaked constantly. Fuel consumption was excessive. Electronics failed repeatedly. Political decisions made the situation even worse. Romania restricted foreign imports in an attempt to save money. manufacturing quality dropped further. Even the country's leadership became frustrated with the tank's reliability problems. The project became a symbol of how politics can damage military engineering. India's Arjun tank began with enormous ambition. The country wanted a modern main battle tank designed and built entirely at home. The project quickly became far more complicated than expected. Requirements kept changing. Technology evolved faster than development, and new problems appeared constantly. Early prototypes suffered from bizarre design flaws. In some situations, the rotating turret could actually strike the driver. The vehicle kept growing heavier and heavier. Eventually, after decades of development, the Arjun finally entered service, but serious problems remained. Accuracy issues, overheating in desert conditions, suspension failures, maintenance difficulties. Large numbers of tanks spent more time being repaired than operating. Even after decades of work, the project still struggled to meet expectations. Bad tanks are easy to laugh at, but most of these machines were built during moments of fear, desperation, or political pressure. Some countries lacked technology, others chased propaganda, and some simply tried to invent the future too early. But every failed tank left behind a lesson, usually written in steel, smoke, and broken transmissions.